move on to the panel discussion titled COVID-19 Accelerating the Inclination Towards a Cashless Society. And it's my pleasure to first welcome and introduce the members of this panel. Nagaraj, Mylandla, Founder and Managing Director, FSS. Praveena, Chief Operating Officer, NPCI. Rama, Vedashree, CEO, Data Security Council of India, a NASSCOM initiative. Sajith, Sivanandan, Managing Director and Business Head, Google Pay and Next Billion User Initiatives, Google India. Shalini, Warrier, Executive Director, Federal Bank. Shankar, Subramaniam, Managing Director and India Head, Global Transaction Services, Bank of America. Siddharth, Rungta, Country Head, Global Liquidity and Cash Management, HSBC India. This session will be moderated by Kunal Pande, Partner, KPMG in India. Over to you, Kunal.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry for that technical glitch, and I hope all of you are there with me. Good morning to all the panelists and the ladies and gentlemen who are in the conference today. I'm very happy and excited to be here among this eminent panelists who have loads of experience in the payment space in the country and have, in fact, worked on a number of initiatives which have led to the tremendous growth which is happening in the digital payments in India. While we say that the digital payments are growing, India, is still a cash society when it comes to retail payments. And the milestone to reach the cashless society, which is what we are talking here, is still somewhere ahead. There are lots of initiatives from regulators, governments, private investments, etc., which are there. The question which I had, and I thought, I will start by asking Praveena, you, in your view, what can be some of the motivations for people to go cashless and use digital channels only? And at the same time, I also wanted to have your views on the same question from a merchant's perspective. So both from a consumer as well as merchant, what could be some of those motivations which you believe are important? Before you start off, given we have limited time, I would request you to be brief so that we can, go through the question and then take everybody's. Over to you, Praveena.
Thank you, Kunal, and good day to everybody. Great to be part of this panel. You've really taken the best question for the first, it looks like. So what really drives movement from cash to digital payments? I think primarily it is habit change. So it is the driving of what is a habit. Today we are very comfortable. Everyone walks out with their wallet or a purse, and in that we keep some change, we keep some notes. Some of us might carry a card or so. And that is a habit that has developed over generations. Our fathers did it and our grandfathers did it, and maybe many generations back there were different kinds of currencies and so on. So changing habit is what really we are talking about here, which derives from many factors. Overall, of course, you have the policy framework, the legal framework, the regulatory framework, and all of that exists. So let's not go there. Coming back to the consumer, it is about the convenience that the consumer feels. And how easy and comfortable it is for the consumer to use a digital payment instead of a cash transaction. And this has to be combined with ubiquitousness, i.e., let's say I take, mobile payments as an example, I'm just able to carry my mobile phone out and nothing else. I actually move away from the wallet, and just using my mobile phone, I'm able to complete my day's requirements. So the ubiquitousness of the acceptance of payments is going to be very important for this big change, habit change of digital payments. And the third is trust. When I say trust, when you hand over cash to somebody, there's very little chance. I think gone are the days when somebody would look at a little big tear in the note or something like that and refuse to take the note from you. But otherwise, that your coins and cash always work. They will always be accepted, which means that our digital payment system should have extremely high availability, extremely high reliability, and have all the key facets that are required to build that trust for a consumer. Now let's go to the merchant side, and these are two sides of the same coin. One doesn't work without the other. For the merchant, from everything that we've seen and the sort of research that we've done, it's always about the consumer. The merchant is running a business. The consumer is a customer. So whatever the consumer really wants to pay, the means and method that the customer wants to use, the merchant is usually happy to supply if there is a certain threshold of volume available, and not for that ad hoc one-off payment or one-off customer who walks in, but if out of 15 people who walk in into a shop in a day, 12 of them want to make a payment of a particular sort, the merchant will ensure that payment mechanism is going to be accepted after that. So the consumer is again the driving factor over there, and it needs to be at a reasonable cost. So I think the merchant is a businessman, runs a business, and hence reasonableness of the cost and something that's very affordable and doesn't really bother his expense line too much also becomes an important factor. So I think these would be the driving factors. If we get these basics right, then this train will keep chugging along very well, and we will also pick up momentum. I should add, we are in the COVID era, the unlock era. This conversation is in that space. So safety is going to be another angle that I will add to this. We are seeing that it is coming to the fore. People do want to avoid, handling of cash. And there is a certain segment of both merchants and consumers who would be very comfortable feeling safer, like the mask and like washing your hands. I think WMD, wash, mask, distance seems to be the new acronym. And, maybe digital, another D for digital payments is what we need to add to that as another layer of safety.
Thanks, Praveena, for that, answer and covering both the sides very beautifully. Right from the convenience to the trust and adding the COVID dimension of safety, which we are in fact seeing from a contactless payment, related requirements and needs coming up, and also from a merchant side that it's the end of the day business. How can they make a business model right? Taking the same question forward to Mr. Nagaraj, you have been in this industry for a very, very long time, and you've seen this industry growing. And you're also providing services to a lot of participants in this business. What would be your take on the same question in terms of motivation for customers as well as for the merchants? Mr. Nagaraj, I think you're on mute.
Good day to you. We've been here for 30 years in this business on the payment side. We don't do anything else. So I have a rich experience of putting the first ATM in this country to issue the first card in the country to all the way to digital payments today. We cut across almost everything today in the company. And we also work very closely with Praveena and other people in NPCI, RBI and other people to make the shift from cash to digital happen. But however, the reality is that cash is here to stay, right? And while the share of cash in the usage is coming down, volume of cash has gone up. Okay, in the COVID situation, we were affected. We run about 40,000 ATMs in the country, right? Our cash came down to about 40% during this COVID period in the first month. It's already bounced back in May to 70%, and we are almost to normal today in June. So it doesn't show that because of COVID or because of digital being here, cash has not gone away. The number of ATMs have gone down, but the number of transactions have gone up. So finally, after several years, our business has become viable on the ATM side. We went through ups and downs on it, especially what we felt in Demon, where our digital volume went up. We had an effect on the ATM. This time in COVID, we have seen equal volume on all our channels, whether it's ATM, point of sale, internet, mobile, digital. We have seen a fair share of increase in all the channels on the volume side. So it's very difficult to say which is going to be the best way to do it. And as far as consumer is concerned, he is looking at acceptance, right? A frictionless way of making payments, safety, security, and fulfillment. Finally, he wants to ensure that the end of the day, end of the transaction, the money is transferred to either himself if he's withdrawing a cash or paying to somebody else. It has safely gone, and there's no hassles of chargebacks, dispute, or settlement processing. So as long as all these things are concerned, the customer will go towards whichever he feels is convenient for him. It's a convenient-based methodology. So all the channels are going to stay, and each one will grow based on how the market moves. That is what on the consumer side. Merchant side similar, but only difference is today the merchant is faced with so many opportunities to accept various means of payment channels. So the merchant has to be geared to handle this and has the time to handle this. So the speed at which the transaction can be completed will be very key for the merchant side, as well as his after completing the transaction, again fulfillment of money transferring to his bank account or to his till in the shop, in a small shop, is what is going to be the factor for him. The pricing is dictated by the government of India, RBI, NPCI, and other people. As long as it is made viable for the players as well, this whole acceptance of digital will be a successful journey in mind. We also need to make money out of this.
Thanks, Nagaraj, for that insight around how the cash is still growing. While at an overall level, digital payments have grown. One of the points which you alluded to is the different opportunities and methods which are there in the market. So which brings me to the next question around a lot of global companies, large banks are there. India itself is doing a lot of stuff when it comes to digital. So while there are a lot of success stories out there in the world, we have our own few. What I was really keen to look at, and I thought, Sajith, you might be the best person to share your thoughts here, given your background. What payment instrument do you think is the best suited for Indian scenario, and what, in your view, is required to make customers stick digital payments after the introductory offers dry up? Because that is something which we are seeing do lead to upsurge. But you know what, as Mr. Nagaraj was saying, cash is still out there, and one of the drive is to see how we reduce cash and bring in more and more digital payments. So Sajith, over to you for your thoughts and insights.
Oh, thank you, Kunal, and thank you for having me on the panel as well. Look, when it comes to payments, India is writing the playbook, for the rest of the world to follow. So that in of itself is I think it's very inspirational. GPay, Google Pay, which was launched as Tez, first in India, was conceptualized and then developed for India. And the reality is, look, what we offer here, Google Pay, is very different from what we offer in the rest of the world. And so one of the things we are doing is that we are taking those learnings from India, and to the rest of the world. So it's wonderful to see that, and I think India will continue to show the world, show the way to the world, right? So that's the good part in this. I think your other part was what payment instruments are best suited. And look, I think instead of thinking of it from an instrument, it's very critical for us to think of the attributes, or how do you really think of what people want from payments or from handling their cash. Nothing is more important to people than the money that belongs to them. And so simplicity, reliability, and trust are the three most important factors for people to embrace digital payments. So any instrument that has these three things, I mean, these three are like table stakes, if you will, right, for any person to adopt digital payments of any kind. So that's the way that I'd encourage the industry and anyone who's sort of thinking about getting into this space to think of it. If you look at sort of our data, the reality is majority of our users are actually from smaller cities, come from beyond the top 7 cities in India for us. So if you believe that that is the case, then for those users, right, they may or may not necessarily be digital natives, etc., and all that. But what they understand is, look, if it's simple to use, if it's reliable, and if it's trustworthy, I'll use it. And so having those qualities are very, very essential. I think the last question you had was, what happens or what is required to make a customer stick. Look, the way I think of that is, and I'm very much a student of this industry as opposed to this panel that spent many, many years on this. But at least what I've learned in the time that I've been in this and sort of watching the industry grow is that the arc of a payment sort of service, if you will, follows three stages. Number one, people generally have to be comfortable that they can send money to other people they know, right? Like so P2P. Then number two is, then the arc as it progresses, they need to be comfortable paying some bills, and we've seen more and more of that happen, and UPI is a good example of that. And number three is when they actually start paying merchants. You like go out to shops or you'll order and everything. So any payment service that sort of traverses this arc and does this in a simple, reliable, and trustworthy manner of P2P, P2C, commercial, as in paying bills, and then P2M, will do well and sort of ensure stickiness.
Thanks, Sajith. I think that's very, very interesting. Focusing on core attributes and your insights that the product GPay is doing fairly successfully in the hinterland of that's very interesting to know. But that also brings me to the next question. That with the COVID and earlier with demonetization, of course, the digital payments really took off. And there are a lot of initiatives and incentives also which government is pushing in. While Sajith, you mentioned that the hinterland is also seeing uptake. What I wanted to also understand is that when we look at paying and accepting, digital payments and looking at the infrastructure and the customer needs in the tier 2, tier 3 cities, what would be the some of the channels or the products which would be more likely to be successful in tier 2 and tier 3 cities? So, Shalini, I would like to invite you here, you are a bank which is having a wide spectrum of customers across the country. So wanted to take your thoughts on how do you see this this element of increasing the uptake in tier 2, tier 3 cities can be more addressed and enhanced. Over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Kunal, and pleasure to be on this panel. So good morning, everybody. I think from my perspective, whether it's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, I honestly think it's going to be UPI that will rule the roost. And it's linked back to what Sajith was saying, which is the attributes of simplicity, reliability, and trust that he mentioned. And I somehow think UPI kind of meets those requirements from an attribute perspective. It's kind of intuitive for customers. They have the ability to try out various apps before they decide which one they're comfortable with and they use it. It is ubiquitous to what Praveena said and getting increasingly so. Any bank account can be used, less expensive. So I think it ticks a lot of those boxes that are required from an attribute perspective, and therefore, primarily driven by some of the efforts that the government is doing, NPCI is doing, as well as meeting these attributes. I think UPI will be, and that's true whether it's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and we are increasingly seeing that in our network. But if you switch from the consumer side to the merchant side, probably a slightly different view from that standpoint. And I think that's where a large part of the battle is really going to be on how to get the merchant side of things aligned from a digital perspective. Our personal view in Federal Bank, and me and my team working on it, we think QR codes are the way to go. There's a lot to do with QR codes that is contactless, simple, Particularly in this COVID days when contactless has become so prominent, anything that is contactless, we think will help, increase the tempo. Having said that, I think there's some things that you need to, get the merchant to overcome. Otherwise, if he doesn't see volumes in it, he's not likely to kind of do that margin of effort that is required from a QR perspective. And some of the experiments we are doing, we're having a very interesting conversation going on, for example, with a coterie of kind of auto rickshaw drivers in some of the tier 2, tier 3 cities that we're present in. What do we do to help them overcome this thing, to move away from cash into more digital modes? And our discussions with them have clearly been around how easy or simple it is to go to QR codes. All they don't need a machine. They can just put it in their auto rickshaws and therefore make it convenient for customers to pay. So that's an interesting conversation we're having, and we've made some progress with that group of customers. Yes, there is a learning for them. There is a learning for the consumer, no doubt. There's a learning for the acceptor of the payment, and reliability. Just making sure the cash actually goes is one of their concerns, because there's the immediacy of cash is difficult to overcome. Another interesting conversation on this front is, I think all of us are aware of the fact that neighborhood kirana stores have suddenly become much popular in the COVID era, and they have traditionally been cash acceptors. Is there a way we can start migrating them into some of these more digital channels? And here again, the benefit is, from a QR code perspective, there is no POS machine required. Some of those kind of physical investments that are required are not there. So I think the merchant side of things will have a slightly different view. My merchant side of things will move more in our sense to QR codes. We obviously have to do a lot of work around safety, security, reliability, and some of the stuff that I'm sure this panel will explore in due course, which is resilience of the network, etc. But the journey is started, and I think these two examples that I've given you of conversations that have been happening will show you the extent to which this is becoming popular in the so-called tier 2, tier 3 cities.
Thanks, Shalini, for that interesting insights, and clearly bringing out that merchant is really key to drive the next wave, because merchants are equally core part of the ecosystem. I would like to move Siddharth to you. From being part of a global bank who is seeing payments across the world. Any insights, experiences which you would like to share with respect to the same question in terms of how the digital payments can be further enhanced and the use can be further increased?
So thank you, Kunal, and again delighted to be here on this panel. To your question in terms of the experiences from a global perspective, in fact, I will pick up what Sajith said. In fact, when I look at the digital payment space, India is clearly, writing the playbook for the rest of the world. In fact, our entire digital payments infrastructure, which is built around the so-called India stack, which is the open standards and the APIs on which UPI and Aadhaar is driving, is really a blueprint which a lot of countries and the central banks are actually studying, and looking at replicating, in their markets. So I think when it comes to digital payments, India is definitely, leading the world. However, there are a couple of areas where I think we can learn and we can, do more than what we are doing today. A couple of areas which I would like to call out. One is in terms of the whole open banking and the sharing of information, with consent. I've been hearing obviously everybody talking about the acceptance at the consumer end and the merchants, from a digital payments perspective, and what can really drive this. Now, I think we need to look beyond the payment as a standalone, or digital payment as a standalone point in time activity, but look at digital payments as something which creates data points. Something which kind of, for both the individual and the merchants, with digital payments over a period of time, it creates a repository of data, and with proper framework in place and with consent, which can be put in place through open banking and the account aggregator initiative, which are being driven by a few fintechs and the banks, it can create an ecosystem of that information sharing, which can then be leveraged, for various other financial services. So, for example, an individual can have a better credit rating assessment or can get credit easier if they have been a far greater user of digital payments. And the same is on the merchant side. So, if the merchants are accepting digital payments, which means it's creating a repository of data, which is not possible in case of cash. And that can be then used in terms of kind of creating a flow of credit, to merchants, which is very important from a growth perspective. The other piece which I want to call out, where I think we can do a lot more, is in terms of usage of technologies like blockchain and the distributed ledger. So today we kind of just talking digital payments, which is one leg of an entire interaction which may be happening. So there are multiple examples. So if you look at the land records, okay, it's all completely paper. The point I'm trying to make is that a lot of governments are investing into these new technologies to completely digitize, the entire interaction which may be happening in a particular ecosystem, where the payment or the digital payment is just that last leg of the value exchange. So I think these are some of the areas where we can do a lot more, which is open banking and the use of blockchain and DLT.
Thanks for sharing that insight. And again, reiterating that India is really writing the playbook. But one question which comes to my mind, and Shankar, I would come to you, is in terms of use of technology, the newer things, DIT, Siddharth spoke about, AI, ML, data science, etc. Are there any learnings which you can share from across the world, which India can really adopt and further uptake the adoption of the digital payments? Shankar, over to you.
Sure, Kunal, and thank you again. It's a pleasure to be on the panel. You're right. I think data analytics as a science has been being used globally for many years, and it's not only restricted to fintech. It's used across healthcare, manufacturing, agriculture, and the likes. And I guess a very recent example that we saw of data analytics coming into play for a strategy was I guess some of the listeners to this presentation would have seen the latest SEC filing from Starbucks, where they kind of called out a pivot in their strategy of moving away from setting up shops in the US to a go-to or a takeaway kind of strategy. And that's purely from data analysis that they did. Obviously, one would assume that the COVID situation would have probably hastened their decision making, but to be honest, if you go through the filing, they have referenced the fact that they looked at the data of their key customers or their regular customers, and 80% of them were typically the guys who used to come and do a takeaway of the coffee. So they completely have changed their strategy based on analyzing the data of their customer behavior, and they've taken a decision to pivot their strategy from setting up shops to setting up, centers where you can just pick up your coffee. Expand that into banks, credit card companies. They've again been somebody who's been regularly using data for analyzing. Credit card spends have been a repository for banks or credit card companies to decide which sector should they focus on, where should they give their reward points, how should they, which brand should they tie up with for additional reward points and stuff. And just extrapolate that to a situation what we are facing today. Ability of banks to know where the consumer is spending or where consumer spending is coming back, as the pandemic evolves itself, is such a useful data point for banks when you are taking credit decisions on a particular industry or a particular sector. They use that as a very base reference, and our bank at least is referencing it on a weekly basis. We are analyzing the credit flow and consumer spend flow to identify, sectors that are returning back as the pandemic evolves. Closer home to India, again, data analytics has again been a very common theme. It has again been used across industries. I think sometime in 2013, revenue from this whole data analytics, big data mining, as the case maybe was predicted to be about $2 billion, with a growth of around 23% on an annual basis. So obviously, it's a space that's been that has been worked on, and industries and companies who are aware of power distribution companies using data analytics to identify system breakdowns, or analyze or predict system breakdowns, which has obviously improved the customer satisfaction and customer loyalty with them. And obviously, fintechs, we all talk about it. I think our understanding of data analytics, at least in a broader sense, has come in after the fintechs have started, especially the ones on the credit side of it, the ones who are giving out your 90-second loans and stuff like that, who obviously are using data in a big way to take those decisions, right? And obviously, again, GST, another very useful source of data for these fintech companies to decide, their credit making decisions. And I think Siddharth just alluded to it in terms of creating that digital footprint by using, digital means to make payments and receive payments. You're obviously creating a digital footprint which gives you that chance. I guess, so to conclude, my little point is that this is being used very actively in India as well as globally. And there are enough and more examples of banks, of industries, banks, and customers benefiting by this data analysis that are being done on a regular basis.
Thanks, Shankar. And I think I took 3 points. One is, being very customer focused, like a takeaway, story which you shared about predicting the breakpoints or the challenges in the system through data, and also, offering very specific products. So, thanks for sharing that, and some of the stories about how it was useful in bringing more revenues for the participants and driving growth. In digital payments, I don't think so our discussion can be over unless we also look at an important element of security. And we do keep hearing about security incidents coming in, and that has a bearing on customers' trust, as we spoke about earlier. Rama, I would like to come to you, and no better person than you, who is at the center of it, also influencing in not many things what the government is doing. What is your take on security concerns arising out of these incidents and its impact on digital payment services, and any insights which you'd like to share with the audiences? Over to you, Rama.
Thank you, Kunal, and good morning to everyone who has joined us for this webinar. Before I get into the security and the privacy issues, we should acknowledge that, some of my fellow panelists talked about we setting the playbook for the world. I think we've really come a long way, particularly in retail and consumer payments, enabling truly 24/7 frictionless payment. But we still have some way to go when it comes to enabling interoperability between the various instruments and various players in the ecosystem through interoperability and making it frictionless. And I think we also still have some way to go on solving what is this holy grail of light touch regulation for low value payments. I think we have some way to go in terms of low value payments, truly making it frictionless, and for the provider and for the consumer, what is that light touch regulation? So now when we look at security and privacy, most of that, broadly in the digital payments transaction chain, it comes in the area of authentication and authorization, right? Almost everything is around that authentication and authorization, because whether it's a security concern or privacy concern, when you evaluate the whole supply chain, it broadly falls into these two buckets. I think we have an opportunity as an entire industry plus the regulators, whether it's RBI or NPCI or even the government, looking at how can we look at and really envision a future modeling for authentication and authorization, which truly leverages the technology. I think we still have highly centralized, there is a concentration risk, and because of that, there could also be security risks in case there's a big ticket cyber attack on any of the platforms. So how can we truly decentralize it and reduce that concentration risk of the payment platforms? But when it comes, and similarly, I think when you look at security, there are two ends. One is how do you step up the consumer awareness? And when you say consumer, we are not just talking about rural citizens. We are also talking of sometimes very highly educated urban citizens falling to a phishing attack or sharing their OTPs. So there is a stepping up the user awareness. On the other side, the platform and the providers, I think we are now moving towards how do you build cognitive abilities in the security? How can we make authentication which is more privacy aware and privacy sensitive, right? So there is a certain responsibility in the platform and the providers in ensuring that we make sure that the platform is architected for a privacy aware or a privacy first and a security first principles by design, so that we are totally minimizing the lack of awareness on the user side. At the same time, I think needs to be a higher awareness and responsibility from the user when they are looking at, we truly, citizen needs to be living in a cave if they don't really understand the basic principles, because the entire ecosystem of institutions like RBI have been doing so much mass media campaigns. We ourselves have been doing. So despite all of that, it doesn't seem to be changing the safety practices and the user behavior when they resort to digital payments, so that they stay away from these phishing attacks. So I would say that there is a need for building those privacy principles or privacy design and security design principles from the platform side, provider side. Assume not going to be aware, user is going to take all these risks, is not going to look at all the awareness campaigns be done, and how do we make security more cognitive, understanding the risks, maybe in terms of authentication. Can we re-envision how do we do authentication and authorization based on the user behavior? I think we need to look at how do we leverage those technologies, whether we look at how do we use more of RPA and the DLT technologies. While we have adequately or more than harnessed the power of AI and ML and NLP in the way that digital transactions and platforms and solutions are being built, are we doing enough in terms of leveraging both RPA and DLT? I think we have some way to go, particularly when it comes to authentication and authorization. From the device side, are we using harnessing the power of biometrics and identity and governance of that identity on the platforms? I think we have some more way to go. But I think primarily, Madam Praveena talked about it in terms of user behavior. We still have the highest cash to GDPR ratio, right? Is there, how do we make sure that we earn the trust of the citizens and we retain that trust? Because I think in digital platforms, while there is a momentum for digital platforms, we are also seeing a wave where there's a dip at some point of time. I think the trust and making sure that there's a safe way to transact and interoperability between payments, because a user is having a debit card, maybe many of them also now have a credit card, but they also use wallets, they use UPI to bank to wallet. There is a lot to be done. So I'm saying there's a certain responsibility on the provider side and on the user side.
Thanks, Rama. I think some of the points which you mentioned around bringing security by design, bringing in cognitive, technology-based authentication, authorization are really something which can help. And of course, it's a responsibility of everyone to build the trust. I think I'm also, actually past the time which I have for this panel. We got a few minutes extension from the host to have. So I'll just have one question, and I think question it's to you, Shalini. How fast, in your view, will rural India embrace digital payments, both from a customer and merchant side? So, being at the role which you have, if you could maybe share your thoughts on how fast the rural India will adopt digital payments.
Thanks, Kunal. I think if you turn to rural India, I think mentioned something to that effect, that a large part of the users that are there on Google Play actually come from some of the so-called rural area. So how fast will it go? I think there are two sets of actions that we will focus on. One is, and taking what Rama said, which is the whole customer security piece of it. How do we give the customer the confidence that these channels are safe and reliable? Today, platform providers, the regulators are all investing extremely heavily on the security side. Despite all the kind of posters, the awareness campaigns, there remains a very large section of the population which probably has not imbibed those requirements. We've got to continue doing that, and I think we've got to supplement it with some of the right actions that we've taken. Things like the custom one-off capability that RBI introduced, a limit on contactless. These are, in my view, at least required till we get to a stage where I think uniformly across India, everybody understands the availability of the technology, the hygiene that is required from a cybersecurity standpoint. These interventions will help, and they help because they will bring more confidence into the system and therefore give the customer the kind of assurance that he can make that leap from cash into digital. So will it happen? I'm absolutely convinced it will happen. That's why this panel is here, and I think all of us remain passionate about the subject, because with that, conversations are happening and that transformation is happening. The other side of it is, however, when it comes to things like regulatory interventions on the economics of this, that I think is something we need to take a little more carefully. The moment we start putting in caps on MDR, etc., it reaches a stage where the provider does not have enough motivation or does not have enough in economic willpower and ability to invest in building these channels. So, when it comes to those things, I think, yes, some of it is required, but I think there should be a fund, there should be a governmental support for it. So unless both the consumer side of things and the merchant side of things both evolve at the same level, and platform providers are able to provide these capabilities to customers in what is an economical manner, what is a value-enhancing manner, the journey will get stymied. Where we are currently today, I'm fairly convinced, at least personally, and the bank I represent is convinced that the journey is well advanced. Do we need to do more? Absolutely. I think this journey never ends, but we continue to invest in all these technologies. We continue to invest in growing this market. We ourselves are seeing a fair amount of movement into digital in our customer base, which could be reflective of India. And I think if you talk to the State Bank of India, you'll get even more insights into how they are seeing a lot more movement into this. So I remain confident it will happen, but it will involve investment both on the consumer side and the merchant side of things.
Sure. So thanks, Shalini. I think we have really overshot our time with such a eminent panel and the passion which all of us have in this subject. I am sure we can continue going on and on, but given the timelines, I'll have to bring the session to an end. I'll again thank all of you for sharing your insights, and I hope the audience got some answers as well as some good thinking points to work on. Thank you, everyone. Ivan, back to you.
Thank you, Kunal, for moderating the panel, and a big thank you to Shalini, Nagaraj, Praveena, Sajith, Shankar, Rama, and Siddharth for your valuable insights. I'm sure we're taking a lot of takeaways, and the audience has definitely benefited from this session. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.